Hello and welcome to episode 13. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He visited Oslo on the occasion of the Palestine Committee National Assembly that took place from the 12th to the 14th of April. This conversation was recorded Sunday, the day after Iran responded to the Israeli attacks.
Dr. Mustafa Barghouti is a Palestinian physician, politician and activist, leader of the Palestinian National Initiative and member of the PLO Central Council. He is one of the most prominent figures in Palestinian politics and has been involved in various political movements and organizations advocating for Palestinian rights and statehood. He has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize multiple times and has received awards for his commitment to non-violent resistance against the Israeli occupation and human rights. He believes in the power of grassroots movements to bring about social and political change. So very excited to speak with him.
Enjoy the episode, and as always,
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine. Welcome, Mustafa. We know you have a very busy schedule, so we really appreciate you taking time to meet with us. There's a lot we want to talk about, but I think we first need to talk about what happened last night. What do you make of this, and what is your perspective?
Well, the first thing to say is that Iran did not conduct an attack. It responded to an attack. It has to be clear. The provocation came from Israel when Netanyahu attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And yesterday, Iran responded in a very calculated and I think careful manner, because they don't want to serve Netanyahu's purpose of transferring this into a wide-range war, which is exactly what Netanyahu wants. So I think they made a calculated response. They did what they needed to do. And in a way, it exposed Israel even more. Because although now Netanyahu is trying to create an international coalition against Iran, that's his dream. But I think the Americans are also very careful. Because everybody knows that Netanyahu is provoking to widen and expand this war as big as possible. I believe the Iranians don't want that. I think the Americans don't even want that. So it was calculated, and it also exposed, as I said, Israel, because it showed that Israel is not almighty. If it wasn't for American and British and many other countries' intervention, they would have had great difficulty dealing with what the Iranians were doing. So in a way, Netanyahu brought on himself a certain level of disaster, because his plan was to show that Israel is almighty, it can attack everywhere. But actually, he revealed Israel's weakness. On the other hand, we have to understand that Netanyahu wants to continue the war on Gaza, or the aggression on Gaza, to be precise. And his goal is, he knows very well that the last day of the attack on Gaza will be the first day of the end of his political career. Yeah. He knows very well that he will be investigated for the failure on the 7th of October. He and Gallant and all the army and intelligence leaders. He knows very well he will also be investigated for his failure in this war on Gaza. And finally, he's facing 4 cases of corruption. Each case can take him to jail. So this man is trying in the most possible aggressive way to expand the war as long as he can, because the end of the war is the end of his political career. He tried to create a huge full-scale war with Lebanon. Now, by attacking Iran, I think he was after trying to create also a full-fledged war that Americans would fight for him in Iran. And I hope he will fail, but he did 3 provocations. in the same week. The first provocation was to kill the 7 international aid workers, to frighten all international humanitarian organizations. And second, he attacked the Iranian consulate. But finally, he did this terrible attack on civilian people, the sons and grandsons of Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas. Because I think he wanted also to stiffen the position of Hamas to justify the continuation of the war. And at the same time, he has done a fourth thing, which is to try to block the negotiations about ceasefire. He keeps, even his negotiators were complaining about the fact that he tries to block these negotiations from reaching an agreement and then use that as an excuse for attacking Rafah. And his main negotiators were complaining that he tried to destroy the negotiations by, first of all, giving the people contradictory instructions and changing them continuously. And second, by limiting their negotiation ability. And finally, by rejecting whatever they achieved. So clearly, this is the most dangerous man in the world now, because he's trying to drag this, and he's supported by fascists in the Israeli government.
Just a little bit about the U.S. as well. You were saying that he's trying to create a coalition now, and we've seen in the past few weeks that although I think that everyone thinks that America is a part of is to blame for committing genocide equally as Israel. Joe Biden has shown signs to a little bit of change in his tone towards Israel. But now that Iran attacked, it has sort of brought them together again. Do you think this was a way to get Israel to fully back them again, even though they haven't actually stopped backing them? You were talking a little bit about that now.
Yes and no. First of all, we have to understand what the United States does. United States and Britain are not only complicit in the war crime in Gaza. They are participant in the war crimes. And they know very well that if the International Court of Justice says that the act of genocide happened, not just plausible, but actually happened, they will be also judged for being a participant. Why? Because since the beginning of this attack, United States sent 2,000 troops to fight with the Israeli army. They sent a lot of their officers to transfer their expertise, their generals who are experienced in urban warfare. And they provided Israel with the largest ever military air bridge in the history of this region. I think more than 240 planes, plus ships, etc. They deployed their fleet and aircraft carriers. And they gave Israel almost 30,000 tons of explosives. And the other 40,000 tons, much of it is also from the United States before. And all this arsenal was used to commit the genocide in Gaza. So right from the beginning, they were there in support of Israel. But Netanyahu failed. They are angry at him because he did not achieve the goals. He was given 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and he still failed to achieve the goals of his attack. He couldn't destroy resistance, Palestinian resistance. He couldn't bring back the Israeli prisoners by force, and he could not impose his control of on Gaza after 6 months. So the Americans are angry. We gave you everything. They gave him everything. They supported him. They prevented ceasefire resolutions 4 times by using veto, and he still failed. Now they are facing the consequences of Israeli crimes in the United States. Because inside the United States, there is a big shift, and especially among the younger generation in the United States, who are the people are against his war on Gaza. more than 70% of the young Americans are against the American policy on this matter. The majority of Democrats, more than 60%, I think, are against Biden's policy on this matter. Even 50% of the Republicans. So Biden now knows that he could lose elections because of this war. If it was for 1-2 months, and then Netanyahu finishes the business, maybe Biden could have escaped this situation. But now the Arabs and Muslims and supporters of Palestine are becoming a political power, an election power for the first time. And that's where Biden now, he's trying to restrain Netanyahu. Here you find a contradiction. Although they supported Netanyahu fully, now they have a contradiction with him because he wants to prolong and expand the war to stay in power. And Biden knows that this would mean that Biden would lose the power. So there is now a conflict between the two sides. What will happen now depends on the coming 48 or 96 hours. Americans are trying to restrain Israel, not to attack again the Iranians, to keep it limited, to contain it. Because also Biden doesn't want to have America conduct a huge war now with Iran. You have to remember that America's interest is not absolutely compatible with Netanyahu's interest. They have other issues like Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And a confrontation with Iran is weakening their position in Ukraine. That's why they are in alliance, but they have a problem with Netanyahu personally for one other reason, that Netanyahu is absolutely hostage now to the fascists. He himself is a fascist. But now what you have is a fascist government. And you've seen yesterday what they've done, the settlers, the illegal settlers. They attacked Palestinian towns, they burned people's houses, they burned cars. And the United States cannot cover up for that, cannot hide what's happening, which is that we have terrorist gangs from Israeli settlers terrorizing the whole West Bank and the whole Palestinian population.
But they've also they've started condemning these settlers, like they've sanctioned some of them.
Nothing, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
What does it mean to sanction 4 settlers when you have 750 settlers armed to teeth? Ben-Gvir gave them 100,000 more weapons, and the rest of them have weapons anyhow because they serve in the army. And these gangs are everywhere attacking Palestinians. They're expanding settlements. Now you cannot have any building in Area C, which is 62% of the West Bank, for Palestinians. So, of course, it's nothing. It's a camouflage. It's a cover-up.
Yeah.
If they were really serious, they should sanction Israel and sanction all settlement activities. And that applies to Norway, not just to the United States.
And it's also, of course, to get the 70% under 30 in America to vote for him again. To do these small PR campaigns.
He wants to use that to improve his position and status, but it doesn't work as long as the war continues in Gaza and the massacres continue and the ethnic cleansing continues. It's horrible now in Gaza. You are talking about no less than 41,000 people killed, including no less than 15,000 children. 15,000 children. And more than 10,000 women, of course. And it's a drastic thing. And in addition to 76,000 injured people, many of whom will die because there is no medical services, because Israel destroyed all hospitals except 3 out of 36. And it's a very disastrous situation. And that's something they cannot hide.
Exactly.
As I said in our talks here, the number of Palestinians killed or injured is 5% of the population. If this had happened in the United States of America, you will be talking about 12 million people killed or injured in 6 months. If that had happened here in Norway, you will be talking about 278,000 people killed or injured in 6 months. It's horrible. The number of Palestinians killed proportionally in Gaza is larger than all Americans killed since the 18th century in all Americans' war. So That gives you an idea about the proportion of this crime that is happening in Gaza.
You tried to get into Gaza as well, right?
Yeah,
You
they
said-
didn't allow me. I used to go every war I was there. They don't let me go through areas, of course, so I always had to travel to Jordan and then fly to Egypt and then cross through Rafah. So the cost of that trip is bigger than the trip to Norway or to the United States. But I managed to be there. I was with our people in 2014 during the war, and in 2012 and in 2008. But this time they didn't allow me.
99% of the missiles were shot down by the Iron Dome yesterday. And I agree with you. I think it was a calculated response. I don't think Iran is very surprised about that. What do you think the consequences are for this response from Iran?
There are two possibilities. One possibility is that Netanyahu will have his way and now attacks again to provoke another reaction. And he will probably try to do that because he wants to create what he calls an international coalition against Iran. This is his dream. The other possibility is that the Americans will not allow him to do so. So it all is in the hands of Biden. It depends on what Americans want and the amount of pressure they can exercise on Netanyahu. But he's a very dangerous man. He's in the corner. A politician, an aggressive politician that is about to lose all powers, and he becomes very aggressive. And that's why I don't exclude the possibility that he will try to do another provocation. But it's very interesting to watch the Western media. They say now Iran's attack on Israel. They don't say Iran's reaction to the attack of Israel.
I'm surprised they don't call it a terrorist attack.
Yeah,
They've just called it an attack.
yeah.
Which they, yeah. But what do you think will happen with the West Bank and Gaza now? Now everyone, as you said, everyone's eyes are on Iran, Iran's attack on...
Not really. This will not last long because the atrocity in Gaza cannot be hidden. The dangerous situation in the West Bank because there is distraction of attention and settlers can do terrible crimes. Yesterday they were on the edge of Ramallah city. They could have entered. And what they have done is horrifying. I mean, they imagine these people come and take your land by force, and then they come back and uproot whatever remains of your olive trees. And now they come back and they burn your cars, and they burn your house, and they shoot your people, and they kill people. And then they go out to the streets and shoot at all Palestinian cars that are moving, while the army is providing them with support and protection. So it's very dangerous. But I think we should not let the world attention shift away from what's happening either in Gaza or the West Bank.
We saw some videos circulating on social media last night that they tore down the wall in Ramallah.
One place, yeah, exactly. Beit Il.
What does that actually mean?
Resistance.
Yeah.
It means people are resisting injustice. And you see, people are for resistance. It doesn't matter which form of resistance. People are for resistance, whatever form it takes. People are against capitulation to the Israelis. And why? Because resistance is survival. Exactly. It's about our future, about the life of our children, the life of our citizens.
Could you describe the current situation in Ramallah now? You live there, right?
Ramallah is besieged.
Yeah.
Since the 7th of October, we lost our main roads. So if you want to get out of Ramallah, to go anywhere, you have to make very long round trip. Instead of 10 minutes, you need an hour to get out. And then traveling to any place in the West Bank is a very big difficulty because you are talking about 650 military checkpoints. At each military checkpoint, you can be stopped. They can take your phone. They can check it. They can beat you. They can shoot you. We have people who were shot at checkpoints for no reason. And economically, people are suffering also because we have so many people who lost their jobs. The rate of unemployment is very high now. And Israel is also conducting piracy against our tax revenue. And the PA, 90% of the Palestinian Authority budget comes from our own taxes, people's taxes. And Israel withholds a lot of the money. I think up till now they are withholding more than $1.8 billion. And so the employees, the government employees, whether you talk about doctors, nurses, health professionals, teachers, they don't get more than 60% of their salary for more than a year and a half now.
Well, this is something that Norway has been very proud of, that they're now helping employees in the West Bank getting their money and their allowance, because they've been discussing, they've made a plan with Israel about this.
They're not really helping because they withhold the money themselves. They're substituting Israel by withholding the money that's supposed to be going to the doctors and nurses and teachers in Gaza. If they wanted to help, they have to pressure Israel to stop this act of theft and piracy. And if they want to help, they have to impose sanctions on everything that relates to settlements, at least, if they don't want to sanction Israel as a whole, which should be the case. And if they want to help, they speak all the time about two-state solution, they should recognize Palestine. Why they don't recognize Palestine after 31 years of Oslo agreement, which Israel has blocked? And the argument I heard is that they prefer dialogue.
Yes.
Dialogue with whom? Dialogue has, as I said before, you can't have one person dancing tango alone. It takes two to tango. And if the Israeli side is refusing to meet any Palestinian leader since 10 years, since 2014, it's not just Netanyahu, all other governments, Netanyahu, Naftali Bennett, all of them, Labid, none of them accepted to meet with Palestinians to negotiate or even discuss the famous Oslo agreement. So how can you say dialogue is the solution? Dialogue when one side refuses to have dialogue. And why don't Norway condemn Israel for refusing to negotiate? Why didn't they condemn the fact that 99 members of the Israeli Knesset out of 110 Jewish members have rejected the idea of a Palestinian state by the proposal of Netanyahu. So it's not just Netanyahu and his fascist government, it's the whole Israeli political establishment.
There's still there are many world leaders, including the Norwegian one, as you said. They always look back to the Oslo Accords and the two-state resolution and keep wanting to push that here. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, they want two states. They have to say four things. You can't have two states without ending occupation. So they should say end occupation. You can't have a state without removing settlements from the West Bank. So they should say stop settlement activities and remove the settlers. You can't have a state without the right of self-determination for Palestinians. And in my opinion, if they don't say end occupation and end settlement activities and remove the settlers, then you don't mean a two-state solution. And if you mean two-state solution, why don't they recognize Palestine? What's the obstacle? You say two-state solution, but you recognize one state, not the other.
They're ready to recognize it someday in the future, they said here.
Why wait
Yeah.
till Israel finishes any possibility? They already finished possibility of a state with all these settlement activities. I think the talk about two states without actions against Israeli violations of international law is nothing but giving Israel the time to finish the job of killing the two-state solution through settlement activities. And I wrote an article back in May last year on the 75th anniversary of the Nakba, where I said Israel has already killed the two-state solution. And the only alternative is one democratic state with equal rights for everybody. People say, but Israel won't accept that. And my response, Israel also doesn't accept two-state solution.
So what do they want?
So what would we wait for Israel's? You have to pressure Israel to accept. And if they refuse one state and refuse two states, what's the alternative to the fact that we are now 7 million Palestinians on the land of historic Palestine, equal, if not a little bit more than Jewish Israelis? What's the solution? No two states, no one state. So the solution for Israelis is what they try to do now in Gaza, which is ethnic cleansing. What settlers are trying to do in the West Bank by attacking Palestinians and moving up till now 30 communities out of their land. Yesterday they moved another community. Actually, I should say 31. Because yesterday the settlers attacked another community in Masafer Yatta in Hebron and forced people out of their homes. So that's the reality of what's going on. Yes, if they reverse settlements, if they remove the settlers from West Bank and East Jerusalem, and if they remove the Israeli occupation, we can talk maybe about a two-state solution. But if none of that is happening, it's just a deceit to talk about two-state solution while Israel is allowed to continue to build settlements. And why there is no more actions, like the Norwegian Investment Fund is the largest fund in the world. It should, in my opinion, completely divest from Israel. Because the settlements are paid by the Israeli government. The leaders in the Israeli government a lot of them are settlers themselves, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir.
Yeah.
And Smotrich was made the governor of the West Bank, practically. And he is now doing everything he can to Judaize the West Bank and annex it. So I think divestment should include not only some settlements, but the whole Israeli establishment, like has happened with the BDS with South Africa. Mm-hmm. It's for the sake not only of Palestinians, but also of Israelis. Because the more this is protracted, the more people will die on both sides, and the more people will suffer.
So we have talked a bit about dialogue. Norwegians especially like to talk about dialogue. I think we're way past dialogue. We can just look at the number and lives in Palestine. We're way past dialogue. We're on sanctions. We're on consequences for sure. What role do you think the international community should play in this?
Well, one of the big disasters that we face is that the Israeli war and aggression on Gaza has revealed that the world is not functioning according to international law. I wouldn't even say it's functioning according to the law of jungle, because this would be an insult to animals. Mm. And the big challenge that faces the world today is, after all these massacres in Gaza, that there is a big question whether there is international law. And we are especially disappointed about all those who have been trying to teach us about international law and human rights and all of that. And then when it came to the worst kind of violation of international law and human rights by Israel, they're not doing much. The world community has to do something not only for the sake of Palestinians, but for the sake of itself. Because if it is chaos and anybody can do whatever they want if they have power, then the world is moving in a very dangerous direction. That's why I think the international community has to restrain Israel immediately, and that means imposing boycott, divestment sanctions on Israel, like was done with the apartheid system in South Africa. Without imposing sanctions on them, they will continue this atrocity. And we are not dealing only with occupation or a system of apartheid. We are dealing with a settler colonial project that tries to continue, to annex more land, to displace more people, to conduct more ethnic cleansing, and worse, to conduct a genocide against a whole Palestinian people. That's why I think the world community has to fulfill its commitment to what they claim. And that cannot be achieved without imposing sanctions on Israel.
We recently had a vote in Norway as well. They were not willing to sanction Israel. They don't think it's efficient enough because they want to keep the dialogue. But we are seeing now as well in different municipalities and councils in Norway that they are within their own communities. They're starting to sanction, like the labor parties in the municipalities are doing their own initiatives, which is good. But I just wish that people would realize the effect that BDS would have and what it will.
It takes time. But I think we see the same scenario like what happened in South Africa. First, it's the people who are convinced and practice sanctions by themselves. Then it comes the civil society and the parliaments, and then the parliaments pressure the governments. In the case of South Africa, not all governments immediately changed. And the last always to come will be the United States of America, if it ever comes. So I think we shouldn't think that this is unachievable. It is doable. If people in Norway say they can't sanction Israel, okay, sanction all settlements, not part of settlements, not a little bit. Sanction anything that relates to settlements. They will find themselves gradually sanctioning Israel because settlements are linked to everything in Israel. So I believe we shouldn't give up and this should continue, but it requires bringing the right information to people. And it requires organization. Without organizing the solidarity huge movement that is now taking place here and everywhere in the world, without organizing it, it will fade away. So the key is to transform this solidarity, powerful solidarity, into an organized system of activities to support Palestine.
And it's especially frustrating now because we have seen the hypocrisy with the war in Ukraine and Russia. The sanctions almost came within 24 hours, but now it's been going on for 6 months.
And they imposed 11,000 sanctions on Russia in less than 2 months. Of course, if you claim that you do that because there is occupation, then why are you on the other hand, supporting Israeli occupation?
Exactly.
And taking no measures? And by the way, I don't buy this whole talk about sensitivity because of the Holocaust and all of that stuff. Because I think the same mindset that allowed the Holocaust against Jewish people at a time when they perceived as weak, the same mindset that allowed anti-Semitism against Jewish people is the same mindset in Europe that is allowing Holocaust for Palestinians.
Absolutely.
It's the same mentality.
Yeah.
And because there was a Holocaust against Jewish people, a Holocaust should not be allowed for Palestinians.
Exactly.
Not the opposite.
Yeah, we should learn from our history.
Especially that we never had anti-Semitism against Jewish people as Palestinians. It was one of the very few places where Jews could live in harmony with equal rights with Palestinians.
Yeah.
We're going to dive into something a little bit, well, it's not different, it's all politics, but you're the Secretary General of PNI, the Palestinian National Initiative. And I think many people are a bit confused as to how to dive into the politics of what's happening in Palestine. There's lots of different parties, there's lots of different opinions.
Actually, I don't think we have more parties than you do have in Norway.
No.
How many parties you have here?
I don't know.
11?
Yeah, maybe something like that.
We have a few.
Yeah.
How many do we have? 11?
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
But
we have 14.
yeah.
Yeah.
But as the ones that we've heard about in Palestine are Hamas and Fatah. Where does PNI stand in relation to those two parties?
Look, there has been a major change in the Palestinian political sphere. Some, I don't want to mention names, but some parties have practically vanished. They don't have real support. But PNI is an idea that was based on two concepts. The first concept is against Oslo Agreement, because the people who initiated the Palestinian National Initiative were not against negotiations in principle. Actually, one of them was the leader of the negotiating team in Madrid, Haidar Abdel-Shafi. And I was one of the team in Madrid. But we were against the deviation from the right approach, which became Oslo Agreement. Let me explain this a little bit, and then I'll come back to the PNI.
No worries.
Why we are against Oslo Agreement? Because of four major mistakes that were made in that agreement. The first mistake is that Palestinians signed the agreement with Israel without insisting, as we demanded, as Haidar Abdel-Shafi demanded, which is to block and stop all settlement activities, not to allow Israel to continue settlement activities. Because we lived in the occupied territories, we understood what was happening. And maybe the external leadership did not understand the system. And the result is very clear now after 31 years. We had 121,000 settlers in the West Bank. Now we have 750,000.
Yeah.
And they became a political power. So that was the first mistake. The second mistake was that Oslo Agreement was about an interim deal without identifying the end result. So the interim became permanent. Third, it included unequal recognition. PLO recognized Israel as a state. Israel did not recognize a Palestinian state. They only recognized the PLO as a representative of the Palestinian people. And of course, this acceptance of dividing the West Bank and Gaza into Area A, B, and C was a grave mistake, because it became Israel's way of annexing 62% of the West Bank and isolating it from the rest. So to go back to PNI, we were all for peace, but we all understood that Oslo Agreement was a grave mistake, and now life has shown that we were right. But that's what got us together. Haidar Abdel-Shafi, myself, Edward Said, Ibrahim Daqqaq, and many other leaders. But the second factor why we decided to create PNI was that we felt there is a certain amount of people, which can be called maybe silent majority, who don't want to be part of the polarization between Fatah and Hamas. They disagree with Fatah way of governance. They respect maybe Hamas, but they don't want to be in Hamas. So there is a certain part of the Palestinian society, we call it the third way, which is non-Fatah and non-Hamas, but at the same time, it shares many values. For instance, PNI is a movement that believes in resistance and believes that without resistance, we cannot get anything. And at the same time, it is characterized by three important things. One is that it is against factionalism, any form of factionalism. Second, it is a major force that works for unity of Palestinians and for the creation of a unified Palestinian leadership. And third, it represents a certain part of the Palestinian society that is marginalized in most other parties, which are women and young people. 80% of the membership of the PNI are young people and women. But in addition to that, PNI is not just a political force. It doesn't work only for national liberation, which is, of course, the main issue, but also it is a social movement. So it believes a lot in social rights and in, maybe you can call it social democratic rights, especially women's rights, young people's rights. We had to fight with other parties about the age of when people can run, for instance. We wanted 18, and some other parties wanted 28 or 30 maybe. And I remember this, it's interesting to tell the story. I remember when I was debating with them and saying, people can run even when they are 18. If they can vote when they are 18, they can run when they are 18. And we have now more than 50% of the Palestinian population are young people. And then one of them told me, one of the older guys said to me, you want to transform the parliament into a kindergarten. And I said to him, listen, I visited Sweden once, and when I was meeting with members of parliament, they told me, we want you to meet the youngest member in the parliament. And she was 23, I 22. And I asked her, we spoke, her name was Yvonne Ruwaida. And I said to her, Ruwaida, it sounds like an Arab name, where are you from? And she was from Gaza. So I said to them, if a young woman from Gaza can be a member of the Swedish parliament, why a Palestinian woman cannot do that?
Yeah.
Anyhow, to go back, so it's a lot of emphasis on social rights, on national rights, but also on democracy and democratic rights. We believe that the Palestinian political structure needs democratization, and that means free democratic elections, but not only free democratic elections. It has to have separation of powers. It has to accept democratic participation of people in deciding who should be their leaders. That's in a sum, and I think PNI is doing very well. I think I don't want to. It sounds like now it is the third party in Palestine.
How do you think we get to a unified front leadership?
By public pressure. Some people in the authority don't want that, and they are resisting it. And I think the best way of achieving that is to have grassroots pressure from the people of Palestine. I think the majority of the people want unified national leadership. So the way to get there is to organize and create a movement of a pressure, grassroots pressure, to achieve the unified national leadership, which we need more than any time before. Now that the Palestinians are facing all these threats and challenges in both West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem and inside the 1948 areas and in the diaspora. One important goal for us, one part of our strategy as PNI, is how to reunify the efforts of the Palestinians in the diaspora inside Palestine and how to give the people in the diaspora the right to participate, because they've been marginalized since the authority was established. And that means when we speak about elections, we don't mean that people in Palestine should participate in elections only, but also Palestinians in the diaspora should also have the right to choose their representatives to the Palestinian leadership.
Good. We see a lot of solidarity throughout the world now. You have been in the Palestinian battle all your life. What do you make of this movement, and how can we use this momentum as best as possible?
It is large, it's huge, it's unprecedented, and it's worldwide. And it brought back the attention to the Palestinian cause. And I think the Palestinian resistance has put the Palestinian issue back on the table after Netanyahu tried through normalization to marginalize it. But it will not be sustained unless it is organized. And that's why I think now, in parallel to activities of solidarity, there has to be a lot of efforts for organizing the solidarity movement, and especially organizing it as a huge boycott, divestment, sanctions movement.
What is the first step, do you think, to get that going? Does it start with the grassroots and convincing the politicians, or is it another way?
Grassroots work.
Yeah.
Of course, grassroots work, civil society work, parliaments, and then governments.
Yeah.
As a healthcare professional, how has the ongoing situation impacted the health and well-being of Palestinians, and what steps can be taken to address this issue?
Well, as you know, we started 45 years ago when we were very young professionals, a voluntary movement called Palestinian Medical Relief, which became Palestinian Medical Relief Society. And it tried to create an alternative health system to what was controlled by Israeli occupation, and to meet the needs of the people. And as such, now it's a large organization that is functioning in West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem. One very important characteristic of it is that it is unified. It's one organization. Most others have splitted between Gaza and West Bank, or between Jerusalem and West Bank, or they disappeared from Jerusalem. So we're very proud of the fact that it remained as one unified organization, which is providing care to approximately 1.8 million people every year. And now we have 35 medical grade teams working in Gaza, everywhere in Gaza, in the north and the center and the south. And just one example of what we've done is that during the last 12 years, we've trained 80,000 young people in first aid. I'm mentioning that because now they are the ones in the field in Tormos Aya and in Mghayer and in other places where the settlers are attacking. They're helping people. And I mentioned all of that because that is the source of where we get our information from. This whole grassroots presence in 600 communities in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and including Jerusalem. And the health situation is very drastic, especially now in Gaza. The Israeli army has made it their goal to destroy the health infrastructure. Our main center was burned completely by tanks. 3 of our clinics were brought down to the ground. 33 hospitals out of 36 were destroyed. More than 240 health facilities were also destroyed by Israel. And they killed no less than 364 doctors, nurses, and other health professionals of our colleagues. They injured more than 300, and they arrested almost 200 people, some of whom, including some of our teams, were subjected to terrible torture with electrical shocks, with beating, and with drowning them in the water, and so on. And the goal is to destroy the ability of a system of healthcare, because the Israelis' original goal is to make Gaza unlivable. But in the process, they destroyed not only hospitals, but also the infrastructure, the water pipe networks, electricity networks, sewage systems. Because of that, we have now an outbreak of serious infections like infectious hepatitis, where 10,000 people are suffering from. And we also have 1 million people who are sick with different diseases, respiratory infections, a lot of skin diseases because people have to be clustered in very small areas together. And then these epidemics. And I'm especially worried about the fact that children did not get vaccination for almost 190 days. And that could mean the outbreak of very serious diseases like measles and maybe even polio.
Yeah.
So the other problem is that we have 10,000 cases of cancer who don't have treatment in Gaza. And it's very difficult to get them outside to get the treatment. It's heartbreaking when you hear about these cases. We have 11,000 injured persons who cannot leave Gaza up till now, who cannot be treated also in Gaza. They need treatment outside. We have, in addition to that, 60,000 pregnant women who cannot guarantee a safe space to give birth in. We have 64,000 breastfeeding women who cannot provide feed their children in a good way. And we have many women who suffer from very serious hygienic problems because there is lack of everything. That especially is hurting, especially young girls and women in general. So it's a disaster now in Gaza.
Yeah.
And as you know, there is very serious obstruction of provision of humanitarian aid. As a doctor, as a medical doctor, I never thought in my life that there will be a time when our colleagues will tell us that they had to amputate on somebody without anesthesia, or even do cesarean section without anesthesia. There was a case when they had to operate on a woman to save the woman and the child, and they didn't have anesthesia.
Yeah.
They only read Quran for the woman to try to help her psychologically. It's very serious, and what breaks my heart also is the fact that there are 20,000 orphans now in Gaza, children. And more than 1,000 children who lost their hands or legs, who had amputation. It's a very big challenge, not just during the war, but after the war.
I think also that we've spoken about this before, and we've also spoken to Dr. Mats Gilbert, who's been in Gaza several times. But I think that when we go through and speak with different people, we usually see the bombings and this is the media pictures that we get. But I don't think that people actually also realize the consequence, like the tiniest consequences that have such a big impact.
Of course. When you speak to people, they tell you, I mean, for them getting water to drink is a big deal. Finding food for their children is a big deal. Many people were killed when they were trying to get some of these parcels. 200 people were killed by Israeli army while they were trying to get some of the parcels that were thrown or get some aid. The simplest thing of daily life is a big problem. Can you imagine a situation when in some of the shelters where there is one toilet for every 600 people?
Yeah.
Or that there is one shower for every 2,400 people. Just imagine if you have to live in these conditions, and you would understand how difficult it is.
Thank you, Mustafa, because you're giving our listeners a lot of information and setting the picture for what is going on. I think it will motivate people to go in demonstrations, listen to the podcast, convince their institution and their companies to commit and serve more to the Palestinians. We need help urgently. We would like to finalize this interview with asking you what makes you most proud of being a Palestinian.
I think what makes me proud are the people themselves, the Palestinians. When you see this resilience, unbelievable resilience, this determination, the feeling of pride and the not giving up. I'm not saying it's so easy, and there aren't moments when people feel so frustrated, of course, and maybe even depressed. But when you look at the level of resilience and this spirit of resistance that is so implanted in the lives of Palestinians, one cannot but get the feeling of proud. You feel proud that you belong to the Palestinian people. And I once was asked by an international journalist, I think, he said, if you were not a Palestinian, what would you do? I said, if I were not a Palestinian and knew about what's happening in Palestine, I will do exactly what I'm doing now. Because it's not about nationality only, it's not about belonging to these people, it's about the issue of justice. The case of Palestine is a case of justice.
Yes.
Everybody can be a Palestinian in spirit.
Exactly.
Exactly. And that's something we've seen as well, which has been very nice.
Right.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time,
Shukran,
Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. And safe travels home.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon, hopefully.
I
in
hope so.
Palestine.
I hope so
hopefully.
too.
I hope so. Thank you.